Welcome to Love Local, the podcast by Jennifer Cornish Design, where we spotlight the incredible independent businesses in Newbury and the surrounding areas. I'm your host, Jen, and each episode I'll be chatting with a local business owner to hear their story, how they started, the challenges they faced, and the creative and marketing decisions that helped them grow. On this week's episode, we are with Jo from The Merry Kitchen. Hi, Jo.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on the Love Local podcast.
Lovely to be here.
Shall we start with how The Merry Kitchen started? Tell me a bit about your journey and how you began your business.
Yes. So hospitality is all I've ever done in my work life, whether that's starting right at the beginning in restaurants and bars. I then, with my career, I was one of those that I didn't then go and get a proper job. Because lots of people think hospitality isn't a proper job. For me, it is. It's my love and it's my passion. So after working in restaurants and bars, I did a degree. And then I went to the NSPCC and I started in their events department. And then I developed within them and started running their big major donor celebrity events and loved it. After the NSPCC, I then went into corporate hospitality and I'd run the hospitality at Ascot and Henley and Wimbledon and big summer parties, big Christmas parties. And then I took a break for a while to have the kids for about 10 years. Wow. Then when my youngest was about 2, I wanted and needed to go back to work. I'd always loved cooking. I'm the sort of person that loves having a house full of people and I can cook for them and not get flustered by it. And I knew I wanted to go back into hospitality because that was my trade and my passion. And I thought I could combine the two. I needed to be flexible because the kids were young. And hospitality has very, very unsociable hours. So I thought I need to be in control of my hours. And I helped somebody out at a catering event and thought, I think I can do this myself. So I thought, I'm just going to have a go and see what happens. And 15 years later,
wow, okay.
Here we are.
Okay. And then how did you actually start out? So obviously that's your journey.
Yeah.
And when you kind of made that decision to go, right, I'm doing this. How did you start? What did you need?
It was
what was the first thing you kind of did?
I
set up?
I looked into what I had to do for environmental health because you've got to tick those boxes. Mm-hmm. So in my utility room at home, I set up this tiny little prep kitchen. I put in a hand wash sink and, fly screens and the real basics. Got a tick from EHO. And then the first job I did, I started to promote it locally. Within the village because I've got a very supportive village environment. And the first job I did was for a friend who's still in the village now. I did a canapé party for 25. I was terrified. It took me about a month to prepare for it. Goodness knows how long it took me to cook it. And then I delivered it. And it was brilliant and I loved it. And then I carried on doing some smaller events like that and grew very, very gradually. But then there was a local market that I asked if I could have a stall at. And I started doing some deli products like quiches, pâtés, sausage rolls, etc. And that's where it really took off because this market then introduced me to a wider community. Once they bought my produce, they liked it, and then they started asking me to cater parties. And that's when it really took off.
Okay. And how did you feel? Because it can be quite daunting when you launch your business.
Terrifying.
Especially to friends and family who kind of think, and again, if they potentially have already thought hospitality isn't a job, so to speak. So how did you feel doing that? Because your friends and family can be your biggest cheerleaders, but then actually when you put it out on the table, literally you're putting stuff out on the table for them to eat.
Yeah.
How did that kind of feel?
Really exposing. Really exposing, but also really exhilarating. And I think because it was exhilarating and I could feel I got the buzz back that I used to have from working in hospitality. And I had to grow in confidence quite quickly or show that I was growing in confidence quite quickly. And work my arse off to make sure it was of good enough quality, teach myself on the job. I'm not chef trained. I'm self-taught cook. Yeah. And I will always say that. But I just had to work really hard at it to make sure it was good enough. And I think feeling exposed made me work harder because I thought it's got to be better than they think it's going to be, because then they will sort of realise it's actually a real job and a real business. And I hope now they would agree it is.
Yes, perfect. And then, so obviously at the beginning you said you did a degree.
Yeah.
Maybe just talk through that a little bit, because obviously, do you necessarily need to have a degree to become your own catering business? How does that kind of work?
No, not at all. I did my degree in drama and English.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And my dad would say basically it taught me how to be a tree.
Okay.
Obviously that was uni back in the old days, and you don't come out with the debt that you do now. Yeah. I loved it. Actually, what I did do at uni, whilst the degree wasn't relevant, I then went on to the social exec and I ran all of the events. Okay. So I sort of knew that I enjoyed that. That was a way of sort of starting to teach me my trade of events, because I knew that's what I wanted to go into. So I definitely did learn. It wasn't actually the degree I came out with, but I know it also probably helped me to get that first job with the NSPCC, because I could say I ran these events, and we ran the parties and the gigs and all of that sort of thing. So I think it definitely gave me a grounding. Did I need to do a degree to do what I'm doing now? No, absolutely not.
And then what about the sort of, you said about chef training and stuff like that? I'm guessing because you've got such a passion for food.
Yeah.
Again, that's maybe not necessarily essential to get into the industry.
No, I don't think it is. I think you've got to have a passion for it and be prepared to learn very quickly and teach yourself. Initially, as I said, I was really intimidated by a canapé party for 25 people, but you've got to start there. Yeah. And then we'll do weddings for 150. We did a big fundraising ball at a local school for 250. But, that's taken 15 years to get to that sort of level of confidence and ability, and also finding my own style. And event catering, which is what I've sort of taught myself, is very different to chefing to the bell, which, as you know, we also now, myself and my husband, run the Red Lion in Chieveley. Yeah. When we took that on 4 years ago, we always said one of the advantages is that we needed to be able to do every job in the pub, whether that's the cleaning, which is what I was doing yesterday morning, and which is what my husband, the landlord, is doing right now, because our cleaner's off sick, or whether it's chefing. And I had to go into the kitchen there and learn from the head chef how to chef to the bell, which is completely different. Yeah. So I definitely was trained, is perhaps a loose word. I had to learn on the job. But that's a very different style of chefing.
And I think that's really important within a business, because if, like you've got a team of people, if one of those elements falls down for any reason, you need to keep going. You need to keep the pace going.
Absolutely.
And you need to be able to pick up those tools.
Absolutely.
And keep everything afloat, basically.
Yeah. And also I think it's really important to be able to show your team, hospitality is generally quite a young team. Mm-hmm. It's just the nature of the industry. And I think it's really important to show all of your team that you're as prepared to be scraping the plates at the end of the night, when it's pitch black and everybody's tired, as it is for you to be the one that's welcoming the bride and groom. You've got to show your team that you'll do all of the jobs.
Yeah, lead by example, really, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah,
lead by example, and say, well, actually, no, I did start where you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to be like me, then these are the things that you have to
do
and go through. Because like you say, you've got, 15 years experience in the industry now.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of, 30 within the events industry, so you've got to show them that, your level of energy needs to be the same at the end of the evening than it was at the beginning of the evening. Yeah. And sometimes when, I've got a 16-year-old and they're kind of going, oh, I'm a bit tired. I'll be like, I'm 55 and we're still going. And you've got to go until 2 a.m, because that's how you get the job done.
Because you do pull in your kids, don't you? They're a big part of the business.
Massive.
As well.
Yeah. It's basically our kids, when I first started, I was having to arrange childcare for them and work in the night once they've been, I put them to bed. Now, they are an intrinsic part of the team, and they're the ones that will lead by example, because they'll see the hours that I've put in prior to that event, or prior to that shift, whether it's in the pub or whether it's on the events team. Yeah. And they know what hard work is, and, because they've seen myself do it, and they've seen Dukes do it, my husband, and they have the same work ethic. That's what I'd like to think.
And that's amazing that they actually want to be involved.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they love, I mean, they do get paid.
Yeah. Okay.
They don't do it for free,
okay,
obviously. But then as a result, then they'll bring their friends in, and it means then our team at events, one of the biggest feedbacks that we get from the events is that people will say, oh my gosh, your team were brilliant. They were so up, they were so energetic, they were so enthusiastic. And a lot of the time it's because they are a team that know each other. And I put a team together. I don't just go with who's available. I go, all of the team have their strengths and weaknesses, but I'll also go with those that I know will bring a good team, that will bring enough energy and that will look like they're having a really good time. Because if the staff and the team are having a good time, then the guests will see that, and you sort of create the atmosphere for the event.
It has a ripple effect, doesn't it?
Totally.
Amazing. So what about when you started out? What was some of the biggest challenges that you faced starting out?
Initially, childcare.
Yeah.
Because, I had 3 young children and they needed looking after, and that was a huge issue. And I think it probably still is, for working mums going back into the workplace, whether you're self-employed or whether you're going back and you're employed in business. So that was a real challenge. But for me, it just meant I worked really weird hours, which was doable. Yeah, you can relate to that. Exactly. We know what that's like. Yeah. I think also one of the biggest challenges initially was probably a little bit of imposter syndrome, because I wasn't trained, I was self-taught. And I think that only came just from, sort of believing in yourself and making out that you knew exactly what you were doing. And that, then that gives you the confidence to build and go, right, actually, I do know what I'm doing. Yeah. I think also one of the biggest challenges, and it still is today in small business, is that, you do everything, So I know how to run an event, and I've taught myself how to chef pretty well. I had to learn all that at the beginning, but you're also finance, your HR, your planning, your marketing, your design, and running all of that at the beginning was really, really daunting. Yeah. And some of it I didn't do very well at all. I've learned to farm some of it out and to bring in people such as yourself. But I still find that really hard today, because I still think, it's your baby and you're really protective of it and you think you know it better than anybody else. And also sometimes just finding the time to hand over aspects of the business that I definitely don't do as well to other people is also quite a challenge. Yeah. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges, but I think it still is.
Yeah. But in a way, you have to hand that stuff over to
you do.
grow.
Of course you do.
Because you can't keep doing it all yourself.
Of course
and
you can't.
If you want to grow and expand, you have to pull those elements of experts in to that business to help you.
Absolutely.
Grow.
Otherwise you can't grow and expand, and it can't be the best business it can possibly be. And I know there are still areas where the Merry Kitchen needs to grow and can grow, and that's about bringing other people in so they can do a better job than I do in areas I'm just not very good at. It also then gives me the time to grow in the areas that I am better in. But I think that's, for me, that's a constant learning curve.
And clearly the Merry Kitchen has grown because you've taken on another business with the pub. So did you want to talk through that a little bit, how that even came about, everything like that?
Run a pub, he said. It'll be fun, he said. So we've been running the Merry Kitchen for probably about 11 years. And we got to the stage where we were just doing, originally we just did the catering. The events got bigger. And as we were going to bigger events, they tended to be events, sort of, weddings and parties where there are bars. And quite a lot of the time, we would be at an event and I'd be running Dukes would be working on the event with me. And he'd look over and say, they're doing that dreadfully. They're doing that so badly. We could do a better job. So we kind of said, well, why don't we? So we started running bars at events and doing it well. And then Dukes is in consultancy, in sports development consultancy, and but I'd always wanted to run a pub. The opportunity came up in our village. We were the idiots that took over the village pub because we sort of said, if we don't do this, we never will. And we've got to give it a try. If we don't do this, somebody else will, and we can't be the people that sit there and criticise those people, I think, unless you've done the job yourself. everybody knows how to run a pub. They think they know how to run a pub. Yeah. Actually running it is obviously a very different kettle of fish. But because Dougs had also started to run the bars for our events, we were sort of building up a knowledge of, what works and what doesn't. So we just took the leap when the pub became available, which was 3.5 years ago.
Wow.
On April Fool's Day.
Oh, wow.
Enough. Yeah,
okay, a real
wasn't
milestone
an April
day.
Fool.
Yeah.
But, and now it's about managing the two. And whilst, the hours are ridiculous, it can be pretty stressful, but it's also a lot of fun. The two businesses bounce off each other. Yeah. Our staff can now overlap. We definitely get some business for the Merry Kitchen from networking and talking to people at the pub. I also then have Merry Kitchen clients. I now do all of my meetings in the pub. So that brings in trade there. So they feed off each other, which is how it needs to be. They can't be completely separate businesses. Yeah. We work together and we work really closely, and both businesses have to work simultaneously.
Yeah, they complement each other.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope they do.
So talking about then both businesses really, with regards to sort of branding, marketing, how have you found that journey with both businesses really? Because obviously we've worked on your Merry Kitchen website.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think within the food industry, I love working with food brands because the photography is amazing.
Visually,
so
it's great.
It just visually sells itself.
Yeah.
So talk me through that a little bit, and if you've had any challenges, stuff like that.
I think it's an area it doesn't come naturally to me. So I find it quite daunting, which is why, I sort of need the likes of you to go, right, this is how we put this together. It's an area where I definitely want to go. It's definitely not my strength. But also I know that visually, because we're in the food and the catering industry, it has to be what sells the business. So I think having that website and having that sort of page and that sort of like visual, reference point. So whilst it's very much an industry, there has to be a lot of trust in events, because people will book me for potentially the biggest day of their life, or their, a huge celebration that they're spending a lot of money on. And generally they'll book me for it before they've even tasted the food. Obviously, they get a tasting a bit further down the line if it's a bride and groom, but that's the way it goes. So, people sell people. They need to trust me before they book me, but that's before they've tasted the food. That means they need to know that I will do a good job for them. And their only real reference point is a visual one. So then they can look at the website that you put together and go, oh, yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. Because the style of food of the Merry Kitchen is very much sort of the feasting food, which is what we focused on the website. They can get a grasp of our style and of what we do. And I think that's really important. So visually, it's a really key element of it. I then also do a lot of social media, and I think embracing that marketing has been really important, because that sort of keeps it current and up to date, and people want to know how the last wedding went, or they want to know what you're prepping. And I kind of had to throw myself into that a bit and enjoy it, because that's a lot of my marketing is through word of mouth, and that's definitely part of that. And a lot of it comes through social media, and that's because they see me going, oh, today I'm doing this, and we're doing a wedding for 150, and that then gives them the confidence to go, oh, so she can do it. I'm not just sort of like, I'm hearing it, I can see it. With the pub, the branding is definitely something that needs working on, which I've spoken to you about. We're about to do an expansion with the kitchen and with the pub itself, which then will take it to the next level. And that's when we then need to look at the branding and the marketing and the website of it. So again, that's an area that needs working on. Again, it's an area that I'm dreadful for putting off, because it's an area that seems slightly daunting.
Yeah, but you can take all of your learnings from the Merry Kitchen
and
transition them across.
Yeah.
Even how you run your social media.
Yes.
Hopefully you've got the confidence to then be able to do the pub stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like you're starting from scratch. You've already kind of know, oh, this is what people like.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess the difference in the pub, when I'm doing the Merry Kitchen sort of, Instagram stories and whatever, I'm at home on my own. Sometimes the kids walk in, they're like, oh God, she's talking to that screen again. And they'll duck out the way. In the pub, obviously, you've got a pub full of people. So either you've got to have people that are kind of like, are interested, or think you're really weird. And you just have to embrace it and get on with it, because people want to see a pub full of people. So that's kind of like the next step, to go, right, we're doing this, we're embracing it, and it's going to be in a pub full of people.
Yeah, and you've got to put it out there, haven't you? You've
Completely.
got to put it out there to get the business.
Absolutely, particularly in the pub trade. The catering industry locally, there's quite a few other caterers, but there's enough work for everybody. We're all at different levels, we all have our own styles. With the pub trade locally, there's a lot of pubs, and getting business is really difficult. And you've got to keep putting yourself out there, and you've got to keep being the pub that people choose to come to. You've got to keep giving them a reason to walk through your doors and not somebody else's. And that's basically about marketing. That's giving them a reason and telling them what you're doing.
Why would you say that is, that it's more of a struggle to get people to come into the pub?
Because I think in the events industry, people are still prepared to spend money on a special occasion. So they'll still have a wedding budget. They'll still have a 50th birthday budget. They'll still have a 21st budget. They'll still have a funeral budget. That's the sort of the level and the range of events that we cater for. Those budgets, I've sort of noticed, aren't what they used to be. And now I definitely have to adapt my menus and tailor make it a little bit more to budget. But that's okay. That's part of my job, to tailor make it to my clients' requirements, whether that's the menu or whether it's the budget. With going to the pub on a Friday night, people can just choose not to go. It's not going to affect their, it might affect their week socially, but they can also choose to go and get, a bottle of wine and a pizza at home. Yeah.
Again, I'm guessing with the things like Deliveroo and expanding all of that stuff, it's so much more accessible now to get food. So to not cook at home.
Oh, completely. Basically. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also, our costs and what we have to charge for our food and our drink in the pub just constantly goes up because of, the cost of food and the cost of the drink that we buy in. So we have to put our prices up in order to pay our staff, pay the VAT, pay the tax. The costs in pubs nowadays are astronomical. I think a lot of people realise that, because I think they realise that their own cost of living has gone up, and hopefully they see it's the same for us times tenfold. Some don't, but I think the majority do, but that still doesn't mean that they have that disposable income. And perhaps instead of coming down to the pub every Friday, they'll come down once a month, which is why then we have to say, right, we'll put a live on every Friday, and then people will come down because they'll think, well, I'd like a bit of live music. We have some really talented musicians who play at the pub, and they'll think, well, I can't get that at home. Or we'll do a feast night, and whilst they can order in a curry, they can't have a full curry feast night put out in front of them. Or we'll do a wine tasting, and they can go and buy a bottle of wine, but they can't taste 12 different glasses with a room full of people. And the atmosphere and the buzz that you can create in a pub, you just can't create in your own lounge.
Amazing. So if we go back to sort of branding and marketing and design, what would you say one of the best decisions you've done to influence your business in that sort of field?
I think when I first started, because I started on a really low budget, I had a really simple design. It was just basically, because I was based at home, it was just sort of my front door. It sounds really simple, and it was, but that's all I could afford at the time. And it was done by a family member. And I was then sort of, once I realised that I needed to invest some money back into my business, I did that through a rebrand with Stronger Together. We then kind of did the full brand consultation. We looked at food a lot more. We looked at sort of brand colours. It was really exciting. I could kind of see my image and what the business was. And that was a really enjoyable experience. So definitely investing some money into that. I think as far as marketing is concerned, the other thing that I did that, basically is cost nothing, is collaboration and working with other local businesses and with venues, building a relationship with other local venues, and then going on to their approved lists. So, for example, Coombe Manor Barns and Forest Edge Teepees, I work with them really closely. They trust me, I trust them. They will say to their couples or party hosts, this is a list of caterers. It's a very small list usually. So it's basically saying to that client, we already trust these people.
Yeah.
So they've done half your job for you. And vice versa. So if couples come to me first as a caterer and they want a venue, I can then recommend them. The same with Antonia, Honor and Pop, who is a party and wedding planner. Again, if she says to a client, I've got the perfect caterer for you, she's basically done my marketing for me. Exactly. And again, vice versa. If a couple comes to me and they're looking for a wedding planner, I would then recommend her. So I think collaboration with local businesses for me has been a brilliant form of marketing. And free, and also about building relationships locally, and it's sort of creating trust between myself and a client sometimes before I've even met them, which is amazing, really.
And it's like you say, it's the best form of marketing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Having that recommendation, not just from a client but also from a business.
Absolutely.
That's your constant stream of new clients coming in, because they're effectively being your cheerleader for you.
Completely.
And just kind of saying, do you know what? No point looking anywhere else. We already work with this person and they're amazing.
Exactly. And this is the person you want to go for. And if you want feasting food, then then you want the Merry Kitchen. And if somebody's already been told that, then you've still got a lot of work to do, and you still need to build the trust and build a relationship, but you're sort of halfway there. Yeah. And that's sort of, it's almost like under the radar marketing, because it's not an obvious visual thing.
But you say under the radar marketing, it's also 15 years worth of building those relationships.
That's true. Yes, that is true.
They wouldn't recommend you if you weren't good, because that would then reflect on their business.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of your year's worth of experience working with that person is paying off, because now you're their only recommended supplier.
Yeah. And vice versa. It means then that I'm going back into venues, and whilst, I also sort of love the challenge of going into a marquee in a field, bringing in a fridge trailer and a generator, and it being like, it's almost exaggerated camping cooking.
Yeah.
But actually going back to venues that and you know where everything is, and you know the setup before you walk in there. There's a huge amount of value in that as well.
Perfect. So last question to you would be, if you could give another business a piece of advice in starting their own business or starting a catering business, what would that be?
I think be brave and be bold and be confident in what you're doing, because you've got to sell yourself. And particularly within the hospitality and catering business, they will buy you first, and you've got to give off complete enthusiasm for what you do. Because if you're enthusiastic about one of the biggest days of their life, or a much smaller event, that will sell your business. I think also, running your own business is quite lonely sometimes. And I think for me, drawing on the local network of other small businesses within West Berkshire has been huge. And that's whether they're businesses that, you can work with, like yourself, or Antonia, Honor and Pop, or, those businesses, or whether it's meeting other people and networking with other people who are also in the same situation, and your businesses aren't related at all. I think, I'm really proud of my business, and I'm so passionate about it, and I could talk for hours about it. But also, some of the time you work a lot of the time on your own, and having the opportunity to go and be with other people locally who are equally as passionate about their business, even if it's not related, has been hugely valuable to me, and has been an enormous part of the enjoyment of setting up and running my own small business.
Yeah, and I think it's about being everyone's cheerleader, isn't it?
Completely,
really?
Yeah.
And I know I love about what I do is just connecting those
completely
people.
Yeah.
I might have a website client come in that needs a caterer, for example, and then I can be like, right, well, speak to Jo from the Merry Kitchen. It's because you want to support those people.
Absolutely.
That are doing it.
And you get a huge amount of satisfaction out of supporting other people in the same the same area as you. They don't need to be in the same industry, but in the same area, and that comes back to you as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much
for coming
on the Love Local podcast. If people want to find out more about your business, your website address is?
It's themerrykitchen.co.uk.
And they can find you on Instagram?
They can, at Merry Kitchen Jo.
Perfect.
I'm on there all the time.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Love Local. If you're a small business owner in Newbury or the surrounding area and you've got a story to tell, I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to follow, leave a review, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Thanks again for listening. I'm Jen, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Love Local.